Hey everybody, it is Nathan Selove with another edition of Autism Actually Speaking. Today I want to talk about destigmatizing dependence. And what I mean by that is destigmatizing the fact that there are still a lot of people with disabilities, especially with autism, that even at older ages, they're still relatively dependent on their parents or on other people, and they can't live a completely independent life. And there's often a tendency of policing within both the autism community and other disabled communities and outside of the disabled community in holding up the disabled person who is completely independent as one of the good disableds, as one of the people with a good disabled life. And I want to fight against that stigma. And I want to specifically fight against that within the autism community, partially because I actually am in the autism community, but also because I think there are very unique problems that the autism community faces with regard to this. So it's important to note that a lot of the reasons why a person might be dependent at an older age, if they're on the autism spectrum, isn't always something that is within their control. Sometimes it might be because a societal failure, because they didn't get access to programs, to institutions, to education that allowed them to learn the necessary skills in order to have a job that can allow them to be independent, or learn the life skills that would allow them to be independent. Number two, some people on the autism spectrum just have different ability levels, just different abilities. Some people on the autism spectrum are never going to be able to be completely independent. For example, myself, in a lot of ways, yes, I seem very independent. But it's also important to note that I depend heavily on my spouse. Like, I know that when we look at spousal dependence, we just think, oh, well, I mean, if you have a significant other, if you have a wife, if you have a husband or whatnot, and you're depending on them, that's just normal. Perhaps, but if I didn't have my wife to be dependent on, I probably would have to be more dependent on my parents. She's dependent on me for a lot of things because she's also on the spectrum. I'm dependent on her. And that's okay. And that's something that I will probably always have a dependence on. Furthermore, I'm also heavily dependent on my service dog, and I don't think I'm ever not going to be dependent on a service dog in order to be able to function properly. And number three, another reason why people are often dependent for longer periods of time in their life is because of financial situations. Sometimes, and this even goes outside of the disabled community, sometimes a person is financially unable to be independent because of their original financial situation. They weren't able to afford certain education that allowed them to get a certain job, or whatever situations might cause that. So that's really important to note as well. And I think that we really need to change the way we talk about dependence and independence within the autism community. Because what we should be doing is not shaming people who have dependence for a longer period of time in their life than others. We should be promoting potential programs, potential aid, in order to help people become more independent. And we also need to acknowledge that even if you don't ever achieve that end-all be-all of a completely independent life, that's okay. And you can still have a decent life in which you are dependent on other people or certain things. You still have worth, you still have dignity. And it also means that you can still contribute to society. We also need to stop pretending that if someone is still dependent on their parents or someone else or some program, that means that they have nothing to offer society. Sometimes it is the aid that comes from that dependence that allows people to be more productive members of society. So, bottom line is, please destigmatize dependence. It's okay to work towards independence. It's okay to promote independence. But don't shame people within your own community. Well, that's today's video. Thank you all for watching. If you liked this video, please give it a like, a share, and if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Check out some of my other stuff. And if you want to support the channel in other ways, support me on Patreon. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like addressed, please leave them in the comments below or message me on my Facebook, also linked below. And remember, if it would completely throw you off if I did not include a "you might be autistic if" statement at the end of this video, you might be autistic.